Yeah, Mike. Jamie. Right here. Right here. Okay, right here. Us older guys. I'm not quite as old as Gerry, though. Need all the help we can get. Sorry about that, Gerry. Anyways, on behalf of the Vancouver Island Organization Committee, I would like to welcome you to this very special occasion of Gerry's 100th birthday. It's really, I got in my notes here, Vancouver style. They have an event in Vancouver, but we're Vancouver Island, we're better than them. Hey. Sorry about that, Candace, but that's the truth. We are working foresters in Vancouver Island. Anyways, it's going to be a great time. It's going to be a very opportunity to us to really just share with Gerry his 100th birthday, and we all appreciate being here and having the opportunity to be part of this program. But I'd like to maybe take a note here and just to recognize the BC Forestry Discovery Center, who donated this facility for the use for Gerry's special occasion. And we really appreciate it. They've been very grateful in helping and just giving the time for Gerry, and it's because of Gerry. And I was thinking about it with Gerry. The Forestry Museum is something that's been in the history of BC, and it's very appropriate to have it for Gerry, because Gerry has been part of the forest history in his 100 years, and most of his 100 years anyway. So I think that's quite a good example and recognition of having the Forest Museum and Gerry together this time. So with that, I'd like to maybe pass it on to Brenda. Brenda has a few notes, and I'd like to bring up a few points. And again, we'd like to thank you for coming and sharing with us this opportunity to be part of Gerry's 100th birthday. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Imagine a room full of foresters, like I never saw one of those before. I've had plenty of time. I would just like very briefly, if I can please, to introduce the volunteers. It wasn't a one-man show or a three-man show or whatever.
Or women.
Lots of folks donated time and effort and talent and expertise to make sure that you have the very best time you can today. I want just to point them out. I'm not going to give you their wonderful histories or their expertise, but if I could get Debbie Battler to come up here, please. Debbie created the fabulous video show that you should see, because it's not just Gerry Burch in the woods, although there's plenty of that, but some riding my horse in 45 years ago and several other things. Debbie has done brilliant work. She's a volunteer today. She is a SEO website expert. We have Debbie Berto, and Debbie Berto is Dad's special friend. I once thought that she was my best friend, but I think she likes Dad better now. And has come over from North Vancouver. She travels with him and helps him make sure he has the best time possible. And this is Debbie, so if you could stand up, because we are going to do a photo op. Okay.
I got chocolate cake on my pants.
That's all that we can do. Pauline, could you come on up? This is Pauline Dewick, and if you think the decorations around here and these beautiful balloons and everything, these are custom made by Pauline, and she's pretty amazing. And Diana, if you could come up, please. Diana is the lady helping at the bar, but she's got lots more talents than that, and certainly helped out. I was about to say that these are sisters, but I think you can see they are. Michael, could you come up, please? Michael Battler and I are long-term friends. I introduced him to Debbie. No, I did not. That's a lie.
Other way around.
Somewhere around. He helped in setting up some of those easels with all the stuff, and we're very grateful for that. Bob, can you stand up? I know you can. Bob is one of the photographers here. He is a lifelong friend from way back when we both worked at Woodward's, and he's come up from Victoria to help us If any one of you are wanting a proper, group photo, Bob is all set up and ready to go, and make sure that it gets sent to you when you want it. Otherwise, between him and Sandy McKellar, they are taking still photos, and you'll be able to access them through the internet one place or another. Joan, there you are, Heidi. Joan is there, helping Bob and helping us in many other ways. Yeah, the camera monkey. So, mostly what I wanted to do here, if I could please, is we are all here today for you. So if you need any help, if you need some instructions, if you need us to do anything for you, here's the team. Did I miss anybody? Dave?
Yourself.
Well, no, I'm not we're the organizing committee, and maybe I could do that for Coombsy. Dave Haley and Steve Lorimer both, and of course Coombsy himself, have done a tremendous amount of work. If these big name tags are any example, Dave Haley did that. Amongst many other things. I like the idea that you had trees that you had to walk through like a red carpet when you came in the door. And at this, I'm going to stop, believe it or not. And isn't that amazing? So can we get pictures?
Slide over.
Oh, slide.
Steve and Wayne.
I'm not part of that.
Where's Wayne?
You good?
Hold on.
Oh, coming in.
I get to show my name too. My name is Wayne Coombs, and how do you like me so far?
It's a community. Thanks, you guys.
Okay. And with that, I will pass it over to Steve Lorimer. He's your MC for the remainder of the day. We're going to get started with some speeches and I'm looking forward to hearing the mic, the open mic, what people got to say. And a special recognition, Dad has 3 nephews, and 2 of them have made a trip from some length. His brother Jack's 2 out of 3 sons are here. This is Gerry Burch 2 and Gerry Burch. Steve, over to you. I told you to keep it quiet.
Well, thank you, Brenda. And welcome, everybody. It's really great to see so many people here that many of us come across each other and say, oh, I haven't seen you for, we don't want to count the number of years because it's way too long. So thank you, Gerry, for having a birthday and getting us all together. That's really great.
You're welcome.
So we do have a bit of a program here where we have put together some 3 speakers to give us a bit of perspective about Gerry over his career and what he has done to impact them in terms of forestry and the things that he's been involved in. He's been such a great advocate for forestry, for the working forest and things like that, that we all can relate to that from many different perspectives. So we look forward to that. As Brenda said, we're going to have a open mic later on for any of you that want to get up and tell a little story or something relating to your experiences with Gerry. Just another little note of at the end, before this comes to an end, we'd like to get a group picture of the entire group or whoever we can here. So we will, just before the 4 o'clock probably, try and clear off this side of the table and
Speak louder.
and I will try and speak louder. I'm not a Wayne Coombs, So we'll try and clear this off so we can get a group picture in front of the steam engine. Just on another note, it's already been talked about, the BC Forest Discovery Centre has made this space available for today, and being a board member, I'm very pleased that was able to work out. I'd really welcome you here, and I welcome you to come back and take a look at the Discovery Centre as you have a chance in your leisure if you're going through Duncan. There's lots to see here. We did a major refurbishment of the displays a while ago, and it's changed quite a bit if you haven't been here for a few years. With that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Ken Williams. And for those of you who don't know Ken is retired as the Chief Forester for McMillan Bloedel. He's been a long-term friend of Gerry's, and he has had lots of working experience with Gerry over the years, and so he's going to have a few words to say. And when I talked to Ken about this, he said, you know, that's on my bucket list to be at this event. So welcome, Ken.
Well, Gerry, 100 years, wow.
Thank you very much, Ken.
I just hope you're around 5 years from now when I celebrate my 100th birthday. I look forward to it. I think that I can say without a doubt that I've known Gerry longer than anybody else in this room. I first met Gerry in our fraternity house in 1949 in Vancouver. Gerry had graduated as a forest engineer in 48, but he was happened to be in Vancouver, probably time off from timber cruising. And that's where I first met him, in our fraternity house. Gerry got me my first job in 1950 at Nat Camp on Cowichan Lake. That was after my third year of university, which led to my first postgraduate job at Kaykus Camp. Later on, as president of the Professional Foresters, I had the honor of presenting Gerry with his Distinguished Forester Award in 1973. I hope there's a picture of that around here somewhere.
There is.
In the 74 years that I have known you, Gerry, we've always been good friends, and you've been a confidant of mine. And I thank you, Gerry, for all that.
Thanks very much, Ken. That was good to hear about your early meeting with Gerry. It's interesting, you're meeting him in 1949. The year Gerry graduated from university was the year I was born. And to speak about different generations, our next speaker is Domenico Leonardo. And I don't know where he was. He's a little younger than some of us. Domenico is forest professional. He's with Mosaic Forest Management. He's the Senior Vice President, Corporate Engagement and Chief Development Officer. Now, I don't know how they have such long titles nowadays. It used to be like Chief Forester, and that was it, but welcome, Domenico.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And, you know, I had the pleasure of being the chauffeur to bring Gerry down here today. And on the way down, I asked him, so did you get your congratulatory letter from the king? And he looked at me quickly and said, who the hell are you? Anyway, the rest of the trip got better. My name is Domenico Yanni Donardo. I'm the Senior Vice President, Corporate Engagement, Chief Development Officer. This is my jersey label here. I'm also here, though, with a variety of colleagues of mine. The current Chief Forester here is Molly Hudson. She's brand new as the Chief Forester and successor to Gerry Burch, ultimately. I had 10 years as Chief Forester, and they were extremely fun. And most of those were with Molly helping me out one way or another. Couldn't have done it without her. And a couple other of our staff members are with us, Rachel and Lori. So we got the full generational spread here today, I might suggest. You know, the first time I became aware of Gerry was walking through a brand new Faculty of Forestry building at UBC. and I spotted this classroom with a name on it. I said, the Gerry Burch classroom. I'm like, wow, this is nice. And it was a brand new building, so it still smelled like a brand new building, and everything was good. And I said to myself, oh, wow, you got to be dead to have a classroom named after you for sure. But I did some research, and quite the opposite. Gerry Burch was very much still alive, very much still active, and I would see his articles in industry magazines and newspapers, espousing the profession and crossing paths at various events at UBC. And so I got to see Gerry in action in his retirement in increments. And then, of course, when you're someone like Gerry, what are you going to do when you have such an interesting life? You write a book about it. So he did that. And if you haven't read it, I definitely encourage you to do it. We were talking about this on the way down as well. It takes discipline, but it's a gift to the next generations. And it should be done. And you can read all about the things from forestry gone by and the development of the industry that Gerry and many of you were a part of. But you can also read about the time, his wife was almost intercepted by one of his roommates who stood in for him on short notice on a blind date, and he was able to talk her back and continue on to make the Brendas and all the other things that we know from Gerry. That was a good one. He also talks about when he was graduating UBC, the aptitude test, the vocational aptitude test, where he makes a quick mention, and I salute him for acknowledging this, that the test said something about him being more sensitive to other people's feelings, and he has his way, but I would suggest that's only because Gerry really cares about everyone. And then you can also read about the BCFP headquarters burning down and all those types of events that you don't really appreciate in modern day history, but it happened. I think you were at a family picnic and there's the BCFP office on fire and you all went over.
Maple Grove Park.
Yeah, Maple Grove Park, having a nice picnic. There goes BCFP office. All right. So Gerry puts out that fire and they reset a week later. So read the book. I did happen to have some time with Gerry a couple years ago. We had a nice helicopter flight around the Cowichan Valley here, and of course he was very much aware of all the landmarks and shapes and figures of rivers that he had walked by many years ago. You know, he's back from the war. He's reminding me of some stories where he's sitting on the hillside up on the north shore of Cowichan Lake, and there's a giant earthquake, and his partner was down the way, and he stands up and he gets to see a tsunami roll down Cowichan Lake and blow out all the marinas, take his boat away, and he has to walk back to base. And while he was telling me this, I'm complaining about the battery on my phone dying and thinking, wow, people were a little tougher back then and had a few real things to complain about. So I always took that as an important lesson from his book and from that day and days in between. Also, you should. I respect Gerry for all the work he's done, just boosting the profession. He talks about it in his book and other times about at risk of being the lost profession. You know, in the middle of the last century, he was busy trying to get not only the faculty acknowledged as an independent faculty of forestry at UBC, but he was working to establish the profession, have it properly recognized as an independent profession. And, I think foresters by nature are optimistic. We go out there, we put this little plant on the hillside and wish it well, probably never see it again, but somebody will someday, somewhere, put it to good use. And I don't think you get to be 100 years old unless you're an optimistic person. So I'm very grateful for you, Gerry, and all your work in raising all of our levels of optimism over the years. And from your forest of friends here, congratulations on another big accomplishment.
Thanks, Domenico. Good to hear a different perspective, and Gerry, you helped to make that all possible. It's interesting how we all have our own little associations and that, and we'll hear a little bit more. Our next speaker is Don McMullen. He was Chief Forester for BC Forest Products. I think he is a career-long BC Forest Products guy from university to retirement. Well, except it was Timber West by the time he retired. But he's worked with and for Gerry over many years, and so he's going to bring us some perspective of his on that. Don?
Thank you, Steve. I happened to be reading my dad's biography that he wrote about 15, 20 years ago the other day. And I came across a section and it said, wow, Forest Service all through the interior, and he got boosted down to Vancouver Island to look at the E&N land grant, to reappraise the E&N land grant. And he figured, okay, great. And he said, I need a bit of staff. So he went to UBC and they sent over a couple of engineering undergraduate students, one of which was Gerry Burch. So Gerry worked with him and they spent some time doing that. And of course went back to university, and Dad figured, this Forest Service stuff is okay. And a buddy of his came and said, hey, there's a new company starting up, BC's Forest Products. How would you like to be the forester? And Dad said, yeah. And the guy said to him, well, you're getting paid $205 a month for the Forest Service. Yeah. And he says, I'm offering you $350 a month. Dad jumped. Like that, did it, okay. And as part of that, he spent quite a bit of time with Gerry, and Gerry came across from the Forest Service to BC Forest Products as well. When I first met Gerry, I didn't really know anything about him, but I was also on the timber cruising party during the summer times, and I was up in Vancouver Bay and doing the engineering stuff, learning about being an engineer. And the timber cruisers came through, company timber cruisers came through, and I figured, God, those guys have got it made. You know, they travel all up and down the coast and the interior and stuff. They got a really exciting job. So I reapplied next summer, and I got a job with them. And I was over in Port Renfrew, and we're looking at a really, really tough piece to get to. There's a great big canyon going way up the hillside, and it was about 10 meters across and 10 meters deep, and you had to walk way, way up and around, like for an hour and a half to get to the piece where you're actually doing your timber cruising. But there was a tree felled across the channel, and it was about this wide, and again, the 10 meters across. And it took us a while to sort of get used to going across it back and forth. And Gerry, as part of his job, used to come out and check your quality to see what kind of job you're doing, make sure you're online, doing productive things. So Gerry comes out and starts talking to us, and we say, okay, let's go. So we hopped across, because they'd been there a lot, across this log and went across. And Gerry kind of started going across the log like this, and he got halfway across, and he looked down, and he froze, like this. And he froze, and he froze. And he went down, and he put his arms around the log, and he hopped across the log like this. And we were so embarrassed, we didn't know what to do or what to say. But anyway, the day went on. Sorry, my voice is going. The day went on, and at the end of the day, we figured, God, we're going to have to go back and go way up and across, and accompany Gerry back down the other side. Gerry comes up the log, walks right across it like that, not a flinch or anything. And that so amazed me that it stuck in my mind, and it gave me a career drive to say, no matter what happens, guys, Don, look forward. Don't look back. You know, you'll be knocked back, but get up and move forward. So Gerry gave me the spirit that allowed me to carry out my career. So in 1965, graduated from university, and again, the log walker hired me as a forester, and so I spent a lot of time learning how to do forestry, primarily in Kaikus and around College Lake. And the big thing in those days was the focus on just reestablishing the forest. So site preparation was the big thing, lots of slash burning and so on. Planting in those days, commonly 8 by 8, a couple of species, Douglas fir, maybe the odd spruce here and there. It was kind of ho-hum, but it was a volume focus. Focus on volume per hectare, that's what you're trying to do. And then a bit later, out of the blue, Gerry invented something called the Resource Planning Group. And this is a group of which some are here today that talked about species, talked about other animals, birds, plants, protection of productive sites, and putting the right species on the ground to take off. So we got into genetics in a big way. We changed how we looked at trees and learned to plant to a certain density to provide a certain size of tree, a big diameter of tree, the value of tree. So we went in about probably 5 or 10 years from, I would say, what was a volume focus of forestry into a value focus on forestry. In other words, growing value, not volume. So juvenile spacing, pruning, so on, genetics, and so on. So we get on to know all that. And the other thing that, I really apologize. The other thing that Gerry, you can laugh if you want. That Gerry really brought forward was the need to co-op, to share, to get out there with other companies, with the Forest Service, the Canadian Forest Service, and also through some of his contacts, we would start hosting people from other parts of the country and from overseas. We had people come in from Sweden, we had people come in from Germany, from the UK, and from New Zealand. And as part of that, they in turn invited us back to look at their forests. And Gerry supported the fact that we did send quite a few foresters over to learn from people out there doing things on their property, private or otherwise. So we've learned that the back and forth knowledge exchange was really key to building relationships that went on and on and on. So at the end of the day, I say that Gerry took us from being straight loggers to forest farmers, where we loved the ground, respected the ground, respected what was on the ground, and understood what we could do realistically without damaging a whole bunch of other things. So Gerry, you made forestry a valuable asset to this province and to other countries. And over and above that, because you allowed me to travel back and forth, you sent me down to New Zealand one time, and I paid off. I came back with a Kiwi wife. And she's still there, by the way. But I think one of the things that, looking at this group, that really valued the company and gave BCFP, I think, sort of a special reputation, was the fact that we had these annual engineers foresters meetings, and they were an incredible advice channel, coming together at least once a year and exchanging information, getting to know each other, which is why so many of us nowadays know each other, because of those annual engineers foresters meetings. So Gerry, thank you for everything.
Okay, thank you very much, Don. That's great to hear a bit of that direct history and how that impacted both you and many people in this room at the end of the day. Gerry, I think you probably want a chance to say something yourself, but before you do that, I just want to say that Gerry at 100 years has not sat down and started watching soap operas or whatever, or maybe he does, I don't know. But I know that he keeps a keen interest in what's going on in forestry. I get the odd email from Gerry, not often, but the odd one. What's going on at Fairy Creek? What about the municipal forest? Oh, I see you've redone the BC Forest Museum. You didn't really have as much about forest genetics as you could in there, you know. That kind of thing. So he's on top of it. He's maintained a keen interest and kept our game up a little bit too as a result of that. So thank you for that, Gerry. And with that, we'll give you a chance to say a few words. Yeah, you can sit down.
I think I talk better if I'm standing.
It's
If I don't use this correctly, you let me know.
All right, stick it right in your mouth.
It's on, you just have to right in front.
Well, hello, friends.
Let's put it in here because it's a bit shaky. Here, you're standing on the board. And then just, it's like an ice cream cone, get your tongue right on it.
Well, first I want to thank the organizing committee. And you know who they are. And you've been introduced to the committee that helped them out. Yeah, I'll talk a little louder, thank you.
Gerry, get right into that mic. Make love to it.
Anyhow, I want to thank them all. This is something that was sort of unexpected. Torchy is the one that started the whole thing off. You can imagine my amazement and pleasure to see all the people that seemingly I have crossed tracks with in the last couple of years. I'm amazed and quite happy to see the number of chief foresters that turned up. I mean, all the way from the new one, Molly, right down to Dawn, Ken. I'm looking through for some of the other chief foresters, but if I missed them, I'm sorry. But I really have an expression of appreciation for them. Now, the orders that I got from the committee was that this is a rebuttal. But how in the hell are you going to rebut when somebody gives you all the kudos? So somebody suggested that maybe the best thing for you to do, Gerry, is to just identify a couple things in your career that maybe is of importance, maybe it's historical, maybe it involves some of the people here, but give us a snapshot of what the last 75 years have done with Gerry Burch. So I've got about half a dozen points of view of objectives and programs that I've been involved with that I think that maybe you'd be interested in. The first one is the first job I ever got. Naturally, this is a great thing. I'm a 17-year-old kid in grade 12, and I think I wanted to go into forestry. I've never seen a forester. I haven't seen a forest. I've never been in a sawmill. I didn't know what the hell went on. And all of a sudden, we heard somebody is coming to interview our class. And it happened to be a fellow from the Nelson Forest District of the BC Forest branch at that time. And he said, we're going to hire maybe 6 to 8 young male students who thought they'd like to go into forestry. So this was a fellow called Ross Douglas. He was the assistant district forester in Nelson. I was really impressed with him. And of course, Ross, to those of us in the industry, know that he ended up by being the vice president of logging and forestry for Alaska Pine and Cellulose. A marvelous man. Anyhow, I applied for the job and I got it. So I said, where am I going to go? Well, you're going to go up to the Arrow Lakes and you're going to work for an assistant ranger up there at $55 a month. So I said, well, I need experience. So okay, I went. That summer, to a certain extent, is outlined in the book, so there's no sense going any further. But that was a real pivotal appointment in my young life. Then I got graduated, and I guess the first year before graduation I needed a summer job. And another Forest Service fellow came out to the university to interview people. And it happened to be a fellow called Larry McMullen, which you've heard about as Don's dad. And he was in charge of surveys for the BC Forest Service. And he said, we're going to run 2 crews this summer. One is going to look at, for the first time, the E&N block. And also, a second crew is going to be on a boat cruise on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And that meant nothing to me. I'd never been to Vancouver Island. I didn't know first thing about anything. So anyhow, I applied for, got a job. And I said, well, where do you want me to go to? And he said, well, I want you to go to Duncan. And he said, it's a little place on Vancouver Island. I want you to be there on a certain date at the bus depot, and I'll pick you up. So, of course, I was there with my pairs of boots, and I'm ready to go. And he takes me out to, it happened to be a place just out of Duncan here where the old Hillcrest Mill was originally. And so I know nothing. I'd never been in Vancouver Island. I had no idea the difference between a fir, a hemlock, balsam spruce, or whatever. So he said, well, we're going to spend the next week educating you people. So don't forget, about half the crew were veterans, and the other half of the crew, who had worked for the Forest Service previous summers, were younger students. And the older guys had no experience. We were all accomplishment. So I'm going to be accomplishment, okay. And then after we got a little bit of training, and he sends me out and he said, you're going to be a cruiser. And I said, holy God, I hardly started. He said, no. He said, you're going to be the regeneration cruiser. And I said, okay, what do they do? Well, the E&N belt was full of loggers. We want you to go to the logged off areas and tell us what's coming back. The other cruisers will go into the mature timber and do the cruising. So I said, fine and dandy. He said, yeah, but I got to tell you, you haven't got any compassmen. You're all alone. I'll tell you where to go, and I'll drop you off, and where you go. And this is where I'm up on a side hill, all by myself, going through these second growth things, when that famous earthquake happened on a Sunday afternoon. It was interesting. That's the second one that I've gone through. But that was quite an event in my life. The next year, I had quite a few years to catch up on after the 5 years or 4 years in the Forest Service, or in the Navy. And so I needed another summer job. And all of a sudden, who appears but this same Larry McMullen at the university? And he wants to set up a crew, in fact, 2 crews. And he wants me to be the boss of both of them. And again, I'm hardly trained to be a cruiser yet. I don't even know the species, et cetera, et cetera. Anyhow, I spent a very knowledgeable summer and increased my knowledge to the point where I figured I was a hotshot cruiser. The next thing that appeared to me was, after graduation, of course, it's obvious. Larry came after me again, and he offered me a permanent job at the same price as a chokeman gets, which was $400 a month. And as a cruiser, you didn't have to go to university to be a cruiser. All the cruisers on the coast were veterans. They were scalers, log scalers, wood scalers. They were, in most cases, very knowledgeable people, but there was no young people wanting to go into this game. But if you wanted a job as a graduate, there was only 7 in my class. If you wanted a job, you either had an engineer on a railroad show, or you had to take a cruiser's job, which I did. And I did that for the next, whatever it was, 12, 15 years. but it was educational. A lot of people here have served on the cruise with me, and figure, despite the difficulties, it was the best years of their life. As far as education, learning, and hard work. Naturally, I went out to the university to do most of the hiring in those days, and I think BC Forest Products was quite popular because we would hire something like 12 to 15 of the top people in the class from Peter Pierce down, and I think we benefited greatly, and so did they. Well, I'm going to skip quite a few years here of BCFP, as well as other companies were expanding. And, you know, first thing that we did was expand to Mackenzie. And so this was a brand new operation for us. There was a lot of changes to be made, both forestry, logging, et cetera, et cetera. But it was an education that, and in a way, and our initial start, as Bob would know, occurred in Alberta. We learned a lot, and we led their Forest Service into some, what I consider brand new policies that I think benefited both governments, industry, and foresters on the ground. But in 1973, we became involved. Incidentally, I should mention the impact that the Royal Commissions on Forestry had in our industry, in my mind. If you look back in the evolution of forest policy, most of our important forest policy decisions came from recommendations made in the Royal Commission reports. And one of the biggest ones was the establishment, a recommendation that they established, tree farm licenses. Now, this is the first area-based tenure allowed in the province, other than the Crown grants, of course. Railroad Crown grants they were. So, tree farm licenses, all of a sudden to us guys out there in a tent cruising, meant a great deal to us, because it meant we may get into forestry. We may do something other than just counting trees. And so all of a sudden you found that at least the major companies that got tree farm licenses were not only hiring foresters, but they were putting them into logging camps. And that is sacrament. And not only that, but they didn't report to the local superintendent or manager, they reported to the chief forester in head office. This is all of a sudden your whole learning atmosphere and ability to do something increased. And so I placed Royal Commission reports, and the fact that foresters played a part in this, as well as the establishment of the association. And with the establishment of the Association of Foresters, the first thing they did was set up a pay schedule. We'd never earned more we never earned anywhere near what the engineers were getting. It was always tied in with what a chokeman gets. And so we all of a sudden started to get a little bit of a snowball going. Wonderful. And so from there on, things picked up. And, well, it just happened that I was stupid enough to get onto and be president of the organization. And the one thing I really wanted was to give some recognition to foresters in the business. some of them, like Larry's, or Don's dad, Larry, who never got any recognition, either within the business or, for that matter, from the government or their employers. And so that's when I set up the Distinguished Forester Award. Not thinking that I would get it, but yes, whatever it was, Ken, 2 years later, Ken's the chairman, and he and his committee gave me the Distinguished Forester Award. That was an important recognition that set me on my way. And then I jumped another 5 years, and all of a sudden I'm away up the Cleana River looking at plantations or something like that. And a bird comes over the truck radio. Gerry Burch has been appointed a vice president. I'm stunned. No forester had ever become a vice president of forestry. You become a vice president of logging, and we already had one of those. So what the hell am I a vice president of? And then it came down. You're going to be a vice president of forestry and forestry tenure. And all of a sudden it struck me. And I'm the first one in Canada that became this. Now today you know that. Molly knows this. Everybody knows it, that all the chief foresters are now vice presidents of forestry. That's a big step forward. And I'm going to finish this off by some of the things that happened right towards the end. In those days, they kicked you out when you were 65. It didn't matter whether you were doing a good job or a bad job. Everybody got kicked out. So I'm a couple years from retirement, and all of a sudden, a new thing came along which made quite a difference in my life, and that is genetics, forest genetics. Sounds dull, I know, but you know, I ran across a fellow called Dr. Alan Orr Ewing, the father of Mr. Orr Ewing, who is in the audience today. And he's a geneticist with the Forest Service. But incidentally, he's the first doctor of forestry at UBC. And the poor guy is working on a very important historical forest enterprise with no staff, no staff budget, and he has no vehicle. And the poor guy, he was telling me this story and telling me about the importance of genetics. And I'm just working for a company as a chief forester, and I had no knowledge of genetics either. So he says, well, you come out with me for one day and I'll convince you on the power of genetics. And he's paralyzing this, of course, to the agricultural industry and all the advances they've made with their products. And so I said, well, fine, so what do you want us to do? He said, well, I need help from somebody. I need help from industry to find these plus trees, he called them. And I said, well, what is a plus tree? Well, it's been defined by the Swedes and the Danes, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I'll take you out and show you. And bring your cruisers along and we'll show them what we're after. Well, we tried leaving it to the companies to do this when they had spare time, but it didn't work out too well. So we set up what we call plus tree weeks. And if you don't think that that's had some effect in this industry, you're mistaken. Because for 6 years, we had plus tree weeks on areas that Alan picked out And we did 100% crews, as some people here that were on the crew know. And we picked out 400 Douglas fir we were concentrating on at that time that had superior, well, whatever Alan told us we should look for. You've got to have straight boles, and you can few limbs and fine limbs and no sweep and all this sort of stuff. Today, I'm just blown away by the expansion of this. It's not only with Douglas fir, it's all species. It's not only coast, it's interior. And it's not only growth now, and incidentally, we planted 300 million trees last year in British Columbia. 300 million, 2/3 of which are from improved stock. They're still testing them, improved stock. And that stock will increase the allowable cut per acre by 20 to 30% in some species. It varies by species. You know, you couldn't imagine that this would ever occur if you hadn't run across a guy like Alan or you who knew the background of it and what we had to do. And as I say, it's spread right throughout the province now. In fact, the lady that's in charge of the interior seed orchards, I should mention seed orchards. Whoever thought when we started, Kenny and I and Don, when we started in industry, that we would be putting in seed orchards, for goodness sake. And then we had somebody come along and tell us that you can't just put a seed orchard anywhere you want. You got to put it in right. I guess the heat has a lot to do with producing cones. But anyhow, they dragged us, all of the companies, chief foresters, down to the Saanich Peninsula. And TASAs and Crowns out back and BC Forest Products, et cetera, et cetera. We bought land down there. We went to our companies and said, you know, I want $100,000 to buy a seed orchard site. Holy God, they thought we were nuts. And so Mount Newton Seed Orchard, which is under Dom's reign. Oh no, it's
Molly McFadden.
It's under Molly now. It's just it's one of the top seed orchards in the province. We produce seed, improved seed for all the demand for the species they have there. Both coast and mostly coast, and has some in the interior. Now that's a big step forward. You didn't mention that, Ken.
I'm looking for you.
Oh God, I can't even read my own writing. The last thing I want to mention is the fact that when you're retired, of course, there's a limit to what influence you have. Nobody listens to the old bugger, you know, that sort of thing. So I'm just telling you that one of the things that a guy called Bill Young, who was chief forester of the Forest Service, and I got together one day and we decided that we should have a history association, Forest History Association. And it's had a tough road to hoe. In other words, most of the university professors are not interested in it. Most of the students, therefore, know nothing about it. The companies, we went to the companies and we said, we want you to turn all your historical documents over to us and we'll put them into nurseries. We got no response at all. So we were really wondering what in the hell we can do to make a difference. So the first thing was to produce some books on noted foresters. And so the first one I did was Tom Wright, I think, was the first one. Then Fred Mulholland, and then Dr. Owen Ewing, And then I got the idea that they're not all as famous as those three. So what we'll do is I'll go out and interview them. I'm retired now, why not? And so I did about 55 people in the industry. I must admit a lot of them are senior foresters and a lot of them are coastal probably. But, I did Harry Gerrans up in Prince George, Neil McLean up in Prince George, somebody else in the Kootenays. And at last we got a bit of steam going on in the Forest History Association. And if you haven't heard it and you haven't read a lot, you're going to hear a lot of what they call anyhow, they're going to reproduce the history part of it. Most of these people have died now, incidentally, a lot of them have. And there's going to be, in the first place, we need money. And so we've gone to places like the truck loggers, and we've got $10,000 to digitize, whatever that does, digitize these cassettes that I produced. And then they will add pictures or other things I collected at the time. And they'll make a report of those to come out so that everybody, including the public, will be able to see these. Now, I just mentioned it, not that it's of dire interest to each one of you, but that it is available, that it's something I was involved in, and I'm quite proud of the Forest History Association, and I'm still every month producing little blurbs that go out on their periodical every 4 years. Every 4 times a year they have a periodical come out. And if you do get it and you are a member, you'll read some of these. Quite interesting. Just one thing, and Alec will reflect on this. As a forester goes through, I'm talking about a cruiser now, and when a forest cruiser goes through a stand, an old growth stand in British Columbia, every so often you come across what we call wolf trees. It's a tree that's twice the size of everyone else. But how did it get there? And why is it there? And this is what forestry, to a certain extent, is all about. It's about learning and being observant. And so you look at these and you say, well, maybe that's one from the original stand that supplied the seed for the old growth that I'm cruising. And lo and behold, it starts to make sense. And then the next thing is you say, well, God, how come it is that these stands that I'm cruising and the wolf trees that are in there are exactly the same in the Nimkish as they are down in Souk. So if that's so, the whole east coast of Vancouver Island is all been established at the same time by some big environmental hassle, whatever it was. Was it a forest fire? Was it a windstorm? Whatever it was. But these wolf trees are very important. And if we're talking about old growth, I don't support the concept that we should keep all the old stands, older stands, sacrament and away from logging. But the wolf trees, yeah, let's keep them because they play a very important part in the very excellent wood stands that we have today, particularly on the coast. I haven't seen too many wolf trees up in the interior, but boy, we had a lot of them on the coast. Anyhow, friends, thank you very much. You realize that it's impossible for me, which I'd love to do, is to sit down with each one of you for 5 or 10 minutes and talk about our history together, but it's not possible. But I thank you very much for coming today and for some reason honoring me.
Well, thanks very much, Gerry. That was really interesting to hear your perspective from many, many years involved in the forestry industry and the business and the changes. You certainly were a change leader when it comes to what's gone on since you started with the timber cruising. Timber cruising reminds me of working for BCFP, having spent the summer cruising in the head office, getting my Statler pencils all ready to color maps for the winter, and Gerry calls me into his office and offers me a job in Port Renfrew. Well, there you go. That was the end of my cruising career, but I went on to more and more forestry things, which included a lot of work at the Mount Newton Seed Orchard and helping to get those plus trees all growing to provide that improved seed that Gerry talked about. And I know I'm involved in a community forest now between Lake Cowichan and the Patchadef Forestry First Nation, and even the seed that we use on that for reforestation today comes from that improved seed that was started in those orchards. So it's great to see that happening, and it's a great legacy that you've left us all, Gerry. So thank you. Brenda's got something she would like to do now, I think, and call her up.
Gee, those are tough acts to follow. Holy doodle. I want to, if we're talking about the Mount Newton Seed Orchard, you will notice that there were some nice seedlings on the trees. This was Pauline's idea, etc. They're from the Mount Newton Seed Orchard, and they're up for grabs. All monies, we'll take it. But I believe that you contributed those seedlings from the Mosaic Forest Management, and we are very grateful for that. What I have here is sort of a little bit more fun. Dig out that ticket that Pauline or Debbie gave you, because if you've admired my hat, this came from a dedication to Dad of a plaque, and there's been 2 of those, but this was in 2004, and I just happened to have 4 hats that this is a giveaway, and we're just wanting to be able to pick out 4 winners, and everybody got theirs in their hand.
So Brenda,
look at how fetching it looks. Just look at how
I don't have one, so I can pull, because I can't
Thank you.
win.
You can't win?
I can't win. But I can pick a winner. There you go.
This one is, and I'll just read the last 4 letters. Why don't we do that? 044. I won't be giving that out. Just 044. That's yours? All right. We thought these little extras might be good. These are, you know, once they're gone, they're gone.
There you go. Good to see you.
Kelly?
Okay, if I pick mine, I'm in trouble.
Thank you. This one is upside down, Brenda. 065. Is that yours? Oh, there you are. My late husband had these hats made. If you knew Bill Dumont, you know he loved doing logos and embroidery and all that sort of thing. But these are, as far as I know, were given away the last supply. Next one, Candace. Candace organized the a celebration in Vancouver, and I understand it was brilliant. so we tried to outbeat you. This is 048.
Bingo.
Oh, bingo.
Okay.
Are you Dickie King? I've only ever been told that you are Dickie King. I'm sure your name must be Richard. Okay, one last one. This is the executive director for the Shawnigan Lake Museum, where Dad loves to go. 027.
All right, okay.
Yay. All right. You don't want that one. That's my old hat. I don't know if I brought it along.
All right.
Okay. And I have one last thing here to. It also gives me an opportunity to say, a number of you have asked me, gee, I don't have a Still Counting the Rings, which is just a rocket of a science autobiography of my dad. So if you could, this is one of the last copies. However, we are working on being able, with the help of Bob Ianson, who found the source, and Debbie Battler, who's going to work with Amazon. You can go on to Amazon and buy one copy, or you can buy 5 or 10, but we haven't quite got the mechanics and the technology ready to go yet, but it's going to be available. This is one, as far as I know, of the last fresh copies, and you've got the author here so you can get it signed if you win. Pick one, Dad. Just one. Can you read?
Very close.
All right, for the Still Counting the Rings, 064.
Never win.
There you are, my dear.
Thank you.
They're stupid enough to let me up to the microphone one more time. So if I may, it'll take less than 3 minutes. First of all, I wanted to give a particularly good thanks to Lorimer Haley, and I want to call you Coombsy, but he has got a proper last name, Wayne Coombs. They worked long and hard to put this together, and it was a pleasure, Jane. Mostly the doghouse downtown in Duncan. It's an important spot. Yeah, you have to go there. You absolutely have to. So there's a bit of a break now before we start in on the open mic. I hope everybody knows where the washroom is, just outside and to the left. There's signs there. Yeah, it's a standalone building. There's coffee and tea, and the bar is open if you want to get any type of beverage, juice, blah, 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 out there. Please find a little bit of time to check out, I call it the memory table, Dad calls it the viewing table. It's got some, his original Distinguished Forester Award is there. There are a number, and you might find yourself in some of the pictures there. And one last time, you really should try and see if you can see the video. It's pretty fun. It's a lighthearted thing. There's a fair forestry component, but there are others, and pictures of Dad that you'd never see elsewhere. Okay, so just let's take a bit of a break, and if everybody can be back who's interested in the open mic.
Okay, it says, "Greetings, Gerry. I regret that I'm having to resort to a relayed message rather than being present, but that's the gift of COVID." Unfortunately, Dave was just recovering from COVID. "Since receiving the invitation, I've spent some hours reviewing my association with you. I believe this started in 1960 when we met for Plustry Week in Alberta. 10 to 15 eager foresters from Tassus, Rainier, Canadian Forest Products, Crown Zellerback, Powell River Company, McMillan Bloedel, and BCFP, guided by Eleanor Ewing, this was truly the beginning of a fruitful 44-year-long cooperation. Between 1960 and 2004, we worked together on the golden age of silviculture continually, with other colleagues advocating for tree improvement, reforestation, spacing, thinning, and brush control. We frequently disagreed with each other, but never to the extent of anger. After retirement, I was fortunate to be part of the Chief Forester's tours you promoted, 8 or 9 of them, and the discussions we had. I remember particularly visiting the Black Hole on the Tofino Highway, visions of Premier Van der Zem making a fool of himself, the unique Mission Tree Farm, and finally, in September 2004, Weyerhaeuser operations in Washington State. As I've aged, memory and reviews of the past have often been an enjoyable pastime, and now this opportunity to share with you falls into the memorable category. Thank you. And as the Scots say, lang may your lum reek. Don't ask me what that means. Okay, so now things are open. Does anybody want to come up and share something?
Steve, I had 2 people email me with a message. Can I share?
Oh, absolutely.
It's very quick, but I just wanted to let you know that Rick Slacko and Debbie Slacko wanted to be here, but their 2 brand new twin grandbabies won out over you, I'm afraid. But they send you their best wishes for your birthday. And then Larry Peterson also said he would love to have been here with you, but the warmth of California called, and so they couldn't make it. But he did go to the Gerry Burch Working Forest and took a picture of the new plaque, which I have for you that I'll send. So happy birthday from both of them.
Thanks, Sandy. Graham.
Thanks, Steve. Well, happy birthday, Gerry. 100 years, eh? You know, it's funny, the older you get, the younger all the older people look. And 100 years old, that's exceptional. You know, Gerry has done many, many things, and he was very instrumental in the development of the forest at North Cowichan, municipal forest. It was 44 years ago, I guess, is actually the time frame. I had just become mayor. I was kind of a young kid and full of piss and vinegar, and I was standing out in front of the financial center with a friend of mine who was a reporter for the Times Colonist at the time, Craig Meredith. Craig said to me, he said, so what are you going to do about the forest of North Cowichan? Well, I had a completely blank look on my face. The trees were around. What do you expect for me to do? Well, he said they need to have some management. So anyway, I went back to Municipal Hall, and John Barakoff, who's the administrator, as I said to you, Gerry passes on his good wishes to you, and happy birthday as well. I said to John, I said, what's with our forest in North Cowichan? Well, what do you mean, Graham? I said, well, do they need some management? Well, we had just little operators working there, but there wasn't really any silviculture management. And I said, well, we should do something about that. And he said, well, I know just the guy. So about 2 weeks later, John phones me and he says, Vice President of BCFP is coming over here to talk to you about forestry. I said, who's the Vice President of Forestry for BCFP? He said, well, Gerry Burch. I said, well, why is he coming over? He said, well, I worked with Gerry for a number of years, and he thinks he can probably give you a hand. So Gerry comes over and sits down in the office, and I go about a long explanation about the forests of North Cowichan and fill them all in, telling them all sorts of things, and explaining to them the situation that we're faced with. And Gerry quietly looks at me and he said, yes. He says, well, here's what I think we should do, Mr. Mayor. Oh, he has a plan. When does Gerry not ever have a plan? He says, I think we should put a little committee together. I said, oh, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Who do you have anybody in mind? Yeah, I've got a young guy that's working for BCFP. His name's Don McMullen. I think we should put him on the committee. And another guy from BCFP, Ron Elder, we should put him on the committee. And a guy from Pacific, Ken Hart, we should put him on the guy. And from the Ministry of Forests, Tom Walker, who's with us here today as well, put him on it. Bill Shuckles from Mac and Blow. And Ken Hart from Pacific. Didn't I say that already? Yes. No, okay. So anyway, I thought that's pretty good. Sounds like a pretty good committee of people. So I said to him, I'll organize a committee meeting. He said, you go ahead and do that. Unbeknownst to me, of course, he phones up McMullen. He says to McMullen, he says, we got a young whippersnapper here that doesn't know his ass from the hole in the ground when it comes to anything about forestry. We got to get him out in the bushes and the trees and give him an explanation of what's going on. So by that time, I was getting quite excited about this, and McMullen comes along with Ron Elder, and they take me out into the forest, and they're going to show me the trees. Well, I've seen the trees, like you guys have all seen the trees. And so we go out to this one tree, and they're standing there talking to me about the forest, and there's all sorts of language that foresters use that nobody else uses and that nobody else understands. Anyway, they were standing there behind this tree and telling me about the rings of growth and so on. Ron reaches around behind the tree and pulls out a core sample. I didn't know that he had a core sample, but he comes back there and he starts explaining the growth cycles on the core sample. I thought that was remarkable. So he went around and he put it back on the tree, and so I went over to this tree over here and reached around and looked for a core sample. I couldn't find a core sample. I said to him, don't all trees have core samples? And he said, no, but they should. So anyway, long story short, we hired Steve Lord, who's here as well today, and Steve became our first forester, and Dave Haley became our second forester. And this guy right here was very instrumental in bringing that all along, and I phoned him up one day and I said, thanks very much. I said, a lot of the guys are quite shy. They seem to rather enjoy talking to each other out in the bush than talking to anybody about forestry. He said, yeah, we have a problem that way. We've got to figure out how to kind of amp up the whole issue about forestry and where we should be going with it. He says, if ever you have any ideas, let me know. And I said, well, what about little trees or little carrots? Is there anything, the semblance of order with carrots and silviculture? And Gerry said, well, yeah, you got a point there. There may be something between carrots and silviculture. What did you have in mind? I said, well, I don't know anything about this, but I got a pile of these carrots because I used to be a grocer, and I'm going to hand them out, and I'm going to tell everybody that it's associated with forestry. He says, well, that sounds like a good idea. And from there, we went all over the place talking about forestry and carrots and silviculture and the importance of silviculture and the importance of trees. And now they're important in so many different ways that we all didn't know. Carbon sinks and a whole pile of things. I don't remember you telling me about that, Gerry. But you, sir, were very much instrumental in the development of the North Cowichan Forest. I was just saying to, who was I saying? To Dave Haley, I think it was Dave. You know that in the early 80s, when things were really tough on a lot of people were unemployed, we put 1,000 people through employment programs in the forests of North Cowichan through some of the most difficult times that those folks ever had. Gave them benefits, got them back on their feet. I still have people that come up today to thank us, thank you guys that were part of that in putting that all together. And I say to you, Gerry Burch, thank you very much and happy birthday.
Thank you, Graham. Tom Walker.
I'm kind of the newcomer when it comes to meeting Gerry Burch. It was just 43 years ago when I met him. My background was with the Forest Service. My background at that time was primarily in the interior and primarily in wildfire control. And I ended up in the headquarters of wildfire control in British Columbia in Victoria. And they created the Forest Service did a big reorganization in 1980, and I ended up as a district manager here. And one of the first people to seek me out was Gerry. And you've heard a little bit about North Cowichan Forest. I ended up in that committee. But I can remember when I got the phone call from Graham, the then mayor, and he said, I'm going to form a citizens committee of citizens of North Cowichan to tell us what to do with North Cowichan's forest. And because it's private, the Forest Service really had no jurisdiction over it. But I was up to my butt in alligators with everybody else trying to tell me how to run the Forest Service. So I thought the last thing I need is a citizens committee. So I says to Graham, I'm not so sure. And he said, why are you hesitating? And I said, I'm a little fearful at times of citizens committees. And he said, well, I can tell you what. He said, it's 6 people, residents of North Cowichan. I can't give you their names, but the remark he gave me, and it stuck with me till today, he says, none of them are butchers, bakers, or candlestick makers. I don't know if you remember that, but I surely do. The other half of the story with Gerry Burch is he had an interest on Sydney Island. And he and Peter Pierce and some others had this idea of planting a few thousand trees on Sydney Island. And so I thought, well, that's private land, nothing to do with me. But Gerry Burch is being a little persuasive. Next thing I know, and I didn't even know where the hell Sydney Island was. Next thing I know, my wife and I are on Sydney Island with planting tools, and we're planting that damn island. So Gerry, you're very persuasive, and we have crossed paths a few times. And I'm just so proud to be here today at your 100th birthday. And that's as good a speech as I'm going to give for zero preparation. Thank you.
Tom? Well, I'm next. Okay. Hi, Gerry. I'm Dave Lindsay. Most of you know me. I'd like to, first of all, give just a perspective from a biologist. We've heard from foresters and the odd politician, but you know, a little bit more important, I think. I want to thank Gerry because really Gerry's the one that started integrating biology and forestry. I think it was early 70s, Gerry hired an environmental forester, Stan Nichols, for BCFP, and which became the resource planning group, and Sally's here, Steve Lord's here, a few others that worked for that group. And I was in university at the time and doing some fisheries forestry research stuff as a summer student, and got out, and M&B had started a group, and I got hired for LUPAT. I see Bill Beasy is an ex-member still here, and worked there for a couple of years, went up for CANFOR, worked as a biologist there, and then came down here to Duncan, BC Forest Products in 1981, and stayed here for however long ago that was, 37, 38 years and whatnot. Gerry's the guy that started this. We've done huge things in integrating forestry and biology. We were able to provide input into the Forest Practices Code and every planning initiative since then, and it's been, I think, an extremely important step in forestry in British Columbia. Second point I want to make is I remember Gerry's retirement. We had it was maybe at a Foresters Engineers meeting. It was in Campbell River. Whole bunch of people and a few things Gerry said stuck with me. Of course, Gerry does talk a lot, so he said many, many things, but like at this retirement speech, he says, this is my swan song, and I remember that. He said a few times, I really want to tell you guys that maybe we should be leaving more trees. And this would have been, when did you retire, Gerry? Late 80s? 87? Yeah. So the Forest Practice Code didn't come in until 8 years later, kind of thing. But it really stuck with me, and back then the Resource Planning Group, or IRAS, or whatever it was called at the time, I think we really started to seriously widen our buffer strips, leave more under the winter ranges, widen our grasp of ecology and managing for non-game species. And so it was a big thing for us, and I think Gerry was the guy who saw the necessity for this at that time, and so I just want to thank Gerry for doing that. He's been a great help to my career, and I think the development of biology and forestry. So thank you, Gerry.
Thanks, Dave.
Can I take the move?
Oh, you don't need this mic, do you, Wayne?
No, I don't need it. My name is Wayne Coombs. And how do you like me so far? That is Dickie Kane, and we went to Dickie Kane. Is it on? I don't need it anyways. We were at a forestry tour at Oregon State University. We got into a taxi, Dickie, myself, and one other. And Dickie puts his head through the roof and he says, loud as we're going down the middle of town, "My name is Wayne Coombs, and how do you like me so far?" I'm sitting down there and saying, "Holy shit." Dickie, never forgot that. Anyway, before Gerry, I just wanted to make a mention. We got a phone call from Bob Rogers, and Bob and Sue want to congratulate you, and sorry that they can't make it here today. I would like to make it, but I need Bob, the engineer at many BCFD camps. So what I wanted to do today is give you a bit of trivia about Burch. If you didn't know it, he didn't really give much support to Trail. I'm from Trail. Gerry's from Trail. Gerry lived in Trail from 1930 to 1942. And there's 3 trivia questions, or 3 trivia things that you should be interested in. Gerry was a renowned forester, and with all the overwhelming achievements. But did you know that Gerry came from Trail? At a time when Trail had no trees. Gerry did briefly address it. There wasn't a tree. They looked like our heads. Nothing. No hair. You ain't got hair, Gerry, either. Trail had acid rain, and there literally was no trees on the hill. And I can vouch for that because I played on the hills in sandbags. The second thing that you should be aware of, Gerry was in the Navy for, well, you said 5 years in your presentation, but you realize he came from Trail. And Trail has only a river going through it. And I don't know where he got this desire to be in the Navy when there's a Columbia River. But there was a Sea Cadet group that used to go out in their longboats, and 10-man longboats, and they would roll up and down there. So I don't know why he got in the Navy from Trail. A trail, a place with no trees and no sea. And the third thing, and this is an interesting thing, Gerry showed leadership in his early days. And because of that, there's a lot of Trail people that follow in his footsteps. And Harry Dembicki, Bill Ewing, all foresters, Ian Fish, Richard Truant, Larry Delfo, and Garth Collins, and myself. So basically, all from Trail, all grew up in a time when there was no trees, and we all became foresters and followed in Gerry's footsteps, but we didn't achieve what he did. He did very well. And again, Gerry, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here and to recognize your birthday. You've been a big influence on myself, and I thank you very much. trees now.
Yeah, trees now.
Dave Haley.
We planted them.
Thank you. So I'm here to give a couple of acknowledgements and then also to bring some greetings from some other people that can't be here. So it's been mentioned before, but all the seedlings on the tables and the cones came from the Mountain Newton Seed Orchard. So showing that nice genetic work, that the results of that. There were 100 seedlings, for obvious reasons. And I also want to acknowledge Tim Hale from Cairn Park Nursery, just here in Glenora. He provided these cedar seedlings at the front door. There's 10 of those, one for every decade. So I'm here to bring on birthday greetings from Jonathan Locke, who wasn't able to be here. Also Darryl McQuillan, the former chief forester from Crown Zellerback. I spoke to Darren about a week ago. He was sorry he couldn't be here, but he's unable to travel. We reminisced a little bit about the New Zealand trip, and he asked me to thank you for your vision, your leadership, and your friendship. And Darryl is also chasing a similar mark. At the end of September, he's turning 99. And then on behalf of myself, this started 46 years ago. I was fortunate enough to sit on the plane to New Zealand besides Gerry and Jean. And I've got nothing but fond memories from that trip, and I want to acknowledge Don for all the organization he did. The second one, and Ron, and if Dave Guyton is still here, he'll recognize the name Doug McLeod. So I was on a Coastal Silviculture Committee field trip out at Chilliwack, looking at some high elevation reforestation. And Gerry and Doug, being keeners, they wandered off into the setting to take a look at what was growing out there. And we were really focused on lunch, so the tour left without them. So it's actually a good thing that you showed up here today. So, and I'm hoping to have some future discussions about the past. We could all figure out how good we were in the past, but also to the future, how we could identify some opportunities, improve our industry and our future. Happy birthday, Gerry.
Thank you, Dave. Gord Rathray.
Happy birthday, Gerry. This is going to be short and sweet, but Don McMullen offered me a salary job in 1980, and he said to me, "You got to come up, you got to meet Gerry Burch, and you got to come up to the 19th floor, 1050 West Penrith." And I got wobbly knees at the best of times. He said, "You got to come up and meet him." I said, "Okay, I'll do that." I'd been a forestry crewman in Maple Ridge for 100 years. I actually went up, and Don, we went into Gerry's office, and Don said to me, "We're going to offer him $1,700 a month." Gerry said, "Not enough, to give him $2,000. And so that's the story. I was able to buy a house and everything after that, but Gerry, if it wasn't for you, thank you for my career. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Tom Jones.
A couple of very short things. One thing Gerry did do is he started the Timberlands group, and that actually became a recruiting outfit for filling in the divisions. Like just about all the divisional people in the forestry and engineering came through forestry came through Timberlands. I was there 1 year in Timberlands, and then I ended up going to the new development called Mackenzie. And there's a wild man up there called Freddie Dietersen. He's the one, I don't know if some people would remember him, but he literally is a wild man when he gets about 2 or 3 beer in him. Anyway, there's a what Gerry would do is he would come and cement relationships by doing tours in each of the divisions, going through the forestry stuff. So that was Fred's pat on the back. He called it, Gerry's coming, Gerry's coming. Get my pat on the back, my annual pat on the back. And so that happened 2 years running, and then the third year, Gerry, he wanted to pass on responsibilities to people that worked for him, so Gerry chose not to come that year. And Freddie was so down in the dumps after the first day that he actually called Gerry, and I don't know what he said to you, but he pleaded the case, and then he had all of us in the room down on the bottom of Freddie Steedrinson's basement sing, "We wish you were here, we wish you were here to help us drink beer." And that went on and on and on. I don't know. So I was the driver, because I was the youngest, and I drive up to Freddie's house, and people are marshalling there, and who walks up the driveway? Gerry. And don't forget, Vancouver is 600 miles away, or 680 miles away from Mackenzie. I don't know how he got there. I assume he must have commandeered the jet, but he walked up as brisk as can be that morning, and we had the Gerry Burch tour. And Freddie was over the moon. The other thing I want to talk about is Gerry didn't talk about it much, but the expansion expanding into Mackenzie, one of the things they had to do was talk to the local natives that were there. And on these tours that Gerry would go up there, the wives were invited. So Colleen, my wife, said, "Come on, guess what Gerry told me?" I said, "Oh, no." She said, "We had to go and talk to all the First Nations and tell them that we were putting in 3 sawmills and a pulp mill." And he said, he just shrugged, he says, "How do you tell somebody that if they haven't even seen a pickup truck?" And you think about it, Fort Ware, which was where he was talking about, there's no road. There were no roads within 100 miles of it. So, interesting experience. Now, Gerry was pushing seed orchards. We also did a seed orchard in Mackenzie. Let me talk about the tenure. It was a TSHL. And what BCFP and Affinity Forest Industries agreed to do was build a town, build sawmills, build a pulp mill, and so they did. And which is crazy. And part of that was the consultation with the natives. And actually, Gerry, I thank you for my career as well, because it was through Timberlands and yourself that I was hired, and prospered and learned a lot through Timberwest. And thank you very much. And happy birthday.
Thanks, Tom. Well, looks like Brian Rawls is coming this way.
Nice.
You guys.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gerry. So I met Gerry over at his table over here, and I walked up, and he smiled, and he said, "Christ, Brian, he's still alive?" I didn't know what to say. I got 3 things. He was always good at this. Every time I met him, he always said, "First this, second this, third this." And he'd have like 6 things. Or remember when he was up here talking, he had a list. He said, "I got a few things." He always had a list. He already has numbers behind them. And he knocked them all off. I could never do that. But I do have one. That was just the first one. I got 2 more. So the second one, I got hired by, I'm sure Gerry was the guy, but I did the usual thing that a lot of students did. We went to the university and did all the interviews. And then I got a letter from, I was Herb Stavens. Herb said, "Come on down." And I didn't know. Sure, I'm coming down. I had a date, and I was told and escorted into Gerry's office, the power office on the corner. And oh my goodness me, you know, here I am, this young student. And he asked me about my thesis. And I went, oh my gosh, what do I say? You know, I said, well, I did this study in Queen Charlotte Islands in Haida now. I'm doing decay analysis stuff. And he goes, we're doing exactly that right now. We're studying that, and there's a problem with how the formulas work. And I said, yeah, I know. And I explained it, and he said, yeah, that's the stuff. And I thought, geez, I'm making marks here. But I have to tell you, I was a little bit nervous. Walked out of the office, shook hands, and away I went. About a week or so again later, I got the job offer. I was so thrilled. My first career forestry job. Thank you very much. The third one was that some people know that I was the area forester for what was called the Crofton Logging Group, and I looked after the private lands on the east side of the island from Parksville to Muir Creek. And actually that's probably Mosaic or Timber West or something country. And Gerry would phone up and he'd say, I want to go on a tour. And he did. He phoned up and said, I want to go on a tour and I want to go to Muir Creek. Most people, many people really don't even know where Muir Creek is. But soup, let's just talk soup. So this is some of his old stomping grounds. So away we go. He flies in a helicopter. We jump in my truck. And I'm going, driving down an island. It's an hour and a half. What am I going to say to him? You know, like, he's the vice president for crying out loud. So somehow we occupied ourselves for an hour and a half. And he wanted to go over here and he wanted to go over there. And we did all this stuff. And I just mentioned, I said, it's an active logging area, Gerry. And he said, well, it didn't bother him any. Anyway, he wanted to go up the main line. Now, people here that know logging trucks will have heard such things as the Pacific 16-foot bunk logging trucks. 100,000 pounds of deck coming at you down the road. So Gerry wants to go up the main line. This is where the trucks are coming. So, do you remember this at all? So we're going up the main line and I'm looking around the corners for dust trails, anything, and I knew where all the pullouts were. And we're going along and he goes, around the corner comes one of these 16-foot bunk trucks and they pile the logs on them in a triangle, great big triangle of logs that are sticking up in the air, and he goes, peg it! And I go, geez. And so I slammed on the brakes and we skidded and we were a little over in the ditch a bit, and I went, I'm looking over him, now the truck is coming at us. So I had to drive over into the ditch to get away from this truck. As the wheels went by, I'm looking at the lug nuts. And then it's the bar going over the top of the truck. Incredible, horrifying experience. The truck goes by, and I look over at Gerry, and Gerry goes, I said peg it, but I didn't say peg it here. So, anyway, I'd never heard the expression peg it before, but I assumed he wanted me to step on the brakes, not the gas. Anyway, scared the heck out of me, but I'm not sure about him. Very
Thanks, Brian. We're glad you're all still here. Doug Kelly.
Hi, my name is Doug Kelly. Unlike a lot of people in this room, I'm still working. I don't know what I've done wrong, but anyway, I'm with the government. I'm here to help. No, just kidding. I'm the director of Forest Tenures Branch in Victoria, and the tenures component I got when I was working with Gerry in Vancouver. Proud XBCF peer, proud timber cruiser, love timber cruising. Alec and I were talking about just how joyful it was to walk around in the woods those days and get lost. It's fabulous. Best job I've ever had, I think, in one way. I was very fortunate. The early 80s were not a good time in the forest industry, and there was a contraction. At one point in time, there was some layoffs occurring. I was lucky. I actually got pulled from the field, and I was working at Crofton at that time with Brian. And I got pulled back into Vancouver, and I was reporting to Jack Tooby. Jack Tuvey was reporting to Gerry, but actually Jack and Gerry were not the real boss. The real boss was Rose. The first day of work, Rose sat you down as the new recruit and said, listen, you can make it really easy for me, or you can make it real difficult. It's your choice. Now, the one thing I know about you foresters is you can't write worth a darn. And I'm going to teach you that. And Rose, as long as you went with Rose, you were golden. So I learned right away, pay attention to Rose. Yeah. Gerry, not so much. Jack, yes, quite a bit. And it's funny that Brian mentioned about the 3 points. Well, working for Jack Tuvey, I learned 3 things. The day I showed up, he said, look, you're only going to be here for 2 years, maybe 3 years at the max. This is a training ground. You're going to go back out in the field, so enjoy it. I expect you to come in every day early. I expect you to wear a jacket, okay? The second thing I learned from Jack was that afternoon naps are okay. I don't know those of you who know Jack, but it was quite common to walk into Jack and he'd be like, yeah. And then the third thing I learned from Jack was always speak in 3 points. And that was something I believe he got from you, Gerry. I would come in early in my jacket, and I'd sit down. Rose wouldn't be there yet. Jack would be about to arrive. Gerry would be in his office dictating. And he would sit down for the first half hour, and he would dictate letters, memos, and I would sit there and kind of listen in, of course, because I'm keen. I want to know what's going on. His letters would be to the ministry, to the regional manager, to the minister, to various other officials, and he would be very accurate and very succinct. In that half hour, I think Gerry made all the money he had to do. All the effort he had to do for that day was done, because he was able to push out very concise, to the point letters that Rose could understand, and it was a beautiful thing. And what it taught me was the beauty of being concise, keeping that 3 points. I still use it today. And the other thing was the visionary aspect that Gerry imparted on the world that he was in. So I want to thank you.
Thank you, guys. Mark Carter.
Hello, my name is Mark Carter. I was a long-term employee of BC Forest Products. In fact, my seniority date was August the 4th, 1973. And just looking at some dates, and that was 2 days after you celebrated your 50th birthday, and halfway to where we are now. But anyway, at the time, Greg Turner, who hired me, I worked for Greg up in a little office we had in McQuinna Tree Farm license, and Greg said, yeah, we've got Gerry Burch coming over. You heard of him? I said, well, yeah, a bit, but I hadn't heard of BCFP, actually, never mind Gerry Burch, before I graduated. But anyway, the big controversy, Gerry, you probably remember, was broadcast burning, you know, where we burned the slash, and yeah, Wayne, you know about it. Anyway, back in the day, broadcast burning was prescribed, where you know, burn the entire setting, and there was a lot of controversy about that. You know, you'd burn the slash and eliminate every living thing on the on the cut block. But just like a lot of things nowadays, practices in the past that are pillory nowadays, I guess, by today's standards, there was good and valid reason why we did that. And I think you'll see it now with the wildfire problems we have. All of a sudden, prescribed burning is back in vogue. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, broadcast burning, we used to do that 50 years ago. But anyway, you had your tour, and
later on, my mother phoned down from Bella Coola and she said, your Gerry Burch is on the front page of the Vancouver Sun. Probably, it's in your book. But anyway, yeah, the CBC, I guess, you had a lot of media people with you, and you were standing in the middle of a blackening setting out in the Keeler Flats. Yeah, and yeah. So anyway, I explained to Mother that this is slash burning. This is what we do. You were vindicated about 13 years later. There was a picture of you standing in the same location with a big sea of green all around you. So that's really Gerry's legacy of forest management. I'm still working on the tree farm license out there. I'm on the Freedom 75 plan. But anyway, that's the legacy that you and the foresters have in the department that you set up. And I think about that often when we're out there, and most of the logging we do now is second growth and plantations that you and your group established. So for that, I thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I was just looking at my watch and realized that it's almost 4 o'clock. So if anybody wants to drink, you got about 1 minute to get it, and because the bar closes. But if there's 1 or 2 more, that'd be great. And then we're gonna clear off the side of chairs and do our group photograph. Or maybe we'll just clear off those chairs. Nobody else. Okay. Thank you, everybody. That's great.